The committee will come to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of our public witness hearing, specifically focused on American Indians and Alaska Native programs. I would like to welcome all the distinguished tribal elders and leaders here today and thank our witnesses for appearing before the committee to share their perspectives on these important topics. In terms of hearing logistics, I will call each panel of witnesses to the table, one panel at a time. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present testimony. The full written testimony will be included in the record, and as I said this morning, believe it or not, we actually do sit down and read the full presentation. So please don't feel pressured to cover everything in 5 minutes. We will be using a timer to track progress of each witnesses. When the light turns yellow, the witness will have 1 minute remaining to conclude their remarks. When the light turns red, I will have to ask the witness to stop to remain on schedule, and we're already behind schedule because they make us vote occasionally. We'll hear from every witness on each panel before members will be provided an opportunity to ask questions. I request that we try to keep things moving so that we can stay on schedule and respect each other's time. I also want to note that committee rules prohibit the use of outside cameras and audio equipment during these hearings. The hearings can be viewed in its entirety on the committee's website, and an official hearing transcript will be available at gpo.gov. I'm now happy to yield to my friend, Ms. McCullum, who used to be the chairman of this committee and is currently the ranking member here.
So thank you, Chairman Simpson, and on behalf of Ranking Member Pingree and myself, I welcome you to our second public witness hearing convening tribal programs under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior. Thank you for traveling to Washington. And as Ms. Pingree pointed out earlier, the Trump administration has only been in office a few short weeks, yet they've unleashed chaos and disruption into indigenous communities and created anxiety and uncertainty for tribal members over their employment status, the continuation of critical health care, their educational services, and in some cases even had their citizenship challenged when presenting tribal IDs. So I hope our witnesses today will use this hearing as an opportunity to sound the alarm, to make us hear clearly about what needs to be done. I thank you very much for coming, and Mr. Chair, as I said earlier, unfortunately, I'll be back and forth, and I think I might miss my fabulous Minnesota tribes this afternoon because of votes, but thank you.
Give them their best for you.
Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and in a few moments, when we call the first panel, I'm going to have Congressman Zinke chair the committee. We're all in different committees and crazy things all across. So, and these are the Montana tribes, and this is my Montana representative. So, he'll chair this. But our first panel is Jeffrey, Harlan, and Ryan. Come on up.
Anything you want, you're good to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first witness is Jeffrey Stiffarm, the president of the Fort Belknap Indian Community. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Appropriations Committee for allowing the Native American community to voice our concerns, and in particular Chairman Simpson, which I consider a close friend of mine. I met with him several times. He has helped with our issues quite a bit back at Fort Belknap, but right now, more importantly, I would like to thank Congressman Zinke for allowing us to be here. The help that you have. You know, you are adopted to our people back at Fort Belknap for what you did in the SEALs, and being a commander for one of our members that was murdered, and what you did for them. So we adopted it into the Assiniboine people back home at Fort Belknap, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you for all the help that you have provided Fort Belknap, but not just Fort Belknap, but in Indian country in general. We did a lot for our people back. Committee members here that are be listening to some of our testimony. from not just myself, but all our relatives here at the table that have issues, what's going on in Indian country and within the federal government. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jeffrey Stiffarm. I'm a member of the Awnee tribe from Fort Belknap. I'm home of the Awnee and the Dakota people. I've been sitting in this position. I'm on my 4th year as the president, but been on tribal council for 8 years, and experienced a lot of ups and downs in my years and as being a politician, so to speak. Prior to that, I was in law enforcement for 20 years, worked my way up through the ranks, all the way up to the chief of police, and that's where I saw a lot of hardships of our people. And basically, where the hardships come from is the lack of funding to the tribes, whether it's health care, whether it's public safety, whether it's courts. I think what's going on right now with this current administration, I agree with it a lot to, I guess, say, cut the fat a little bit. A lot of the money that's getting given over to the Bureau of Indian Affairs is not trickling down to the tribes. Fort Belknap had the Sioux Office of Justice Services within the BIA for public safety. We 638'd law enforcement in 1997, and with our base funding at $1.2 million. Here we are in 2026, 2025. Base funding is $1.3 million, increased $100,000 in 20 plus years. What does that tell you? It tells you the federal government doesn't care about the tribes, the public safety, the health care. They rather keep most of that money that they have for themselves. I'm glad you guys are doing an investigation on how this money is given to them and how it is being spent, because it's not coming to the people of the reservations that really need it. Our healthcare system is pretty dilapidated. Behavioral health. I have a story about that, but I don't have too much time to talk about that. But our mental health system is failing our children. Fort Belknap had outbreak of suicides, and I lost my son to that about 5 years ago. And it's pretty hard still to swallow that, to know that we didn't have the help with the doctors or the mental health to save him. But my child isn't the only one that we lost. We lost more than that. More children. And that just not happening on Fort Belknap with the mental health issues. It's on all our reservations, because we really don't have anything. We're fighting for our like I said, our public safety. I was here to testify on our cartels here last fall, and our hands are tied because our reservation is comprised of about 700,000 acres. Our law enforcement consists of 7 officers to cover that many acres, and we have 3 towns within our reservation, and it takes about, from our main agency to our most outlying town, about an hour drive. And we have 1 officer to cover all of that. And that's what we're fighting for, is fighting for our lives. Our future is in your hands, all your hands. And we ceded all our lands away when we signed our treaties, millions and millions of acres, with the promise from the federal government that they were going to take care of us, whether it's health care, whether it's food, whether it's our water. And they call it the supreme law of the land, but that is not being honored. And I ask you all to remember our treaties that we all signed, all our tribes that have come talk to you before me, and that's going to be talking after me, that our treaties, we still stand by them, our sovereignty. We just ask you that, we don't need a handout, we need a hand up. And we appreciate you guys all listening to us. And my friend and my brother here that be talking after me, he has the same issues on the Ojibwe Reservation right next to Fort Belknap, public safety issues, mental health. But we want you all to have some compassion for the hardships that we have on our reservations, And I ask you to listen to us all with your hearts, not your ears, so they all come. You realize how important it is. The struggles that we have, each reservation has pretty much the same struggles with the lack of funding. And the bureaucrats, whether it's in the BIA or the Indian Health Service, and how they trickle down pennies to the tribes, and they keep most of the money to themselves. We found that out within our lawsuit when we sued OJS. And that's going to be coming to a head here this coming spring. But we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to sue the federal government, in particular the BIA, what's rightfully the tribes. We shouldn't have to do that. That's where I'm very frustrated that these programs with the Indian Health Service and then the BIA, there's tribal members that are running these programs that are doing it to tribal members. And I'm very frustrated by that. And it's hard to fathom that we have to live like that our own people are treating us like that. That's why I say, I'm glad the money is getting looked at and how it's coming into the BIA and Indian Health Service and how it's going out to the tribes, and where most of the money is going is staying within the pockets of the admin staff with the IHS and the BIA. With that, I want to thank you, Al, again, especially you, Mr. Zinke, Congressman Zinke. I thank you for all your help. Our water settlement, you've been really helping us with that, and it's going to help the whole north central part of Montana all the way to North and South Dakota. And without your leadership with that, we'd be probably back to square one, back when we 1908 when we did the Winter's Doctrine, and did it for all the tribes across the country so that they can get their water. And water is life. Ganahea.
Sorry, Chairman Baker from Rocky Boy.
Thank you. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the subcommittee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Harlan Baker. I serve as the chairman of the Chippewa Cree tribe of the Rocky Boys Reservation. Our reservation is rurally located. We have a total membership of 7,000 members on the reservation. In 1993, we became one of the first tribes to achieve self-governance. Today, we operate the Rocky Boy Health Center, where we offer American care to Indians in our region. We appreciate this subcommittee's recent historic investments in Indian country. However, there is still much work to be done. The federal trust and treaty obligation must be fulfilled, regardless of broader budgetary concerns, to protect the health and well-being of our people. I offer the following fiscal year 26 recommendations. Protect the IHS budget. Tribal health programs work to provide high-quality health care, but chronic underfunding harms our people. Tribal communities face higher rates of preventable conditions. Despite this, IHS funding is at constant risk of cuts, sequestration, and funding freezes. In January 2025, OMB paused federal financial assistance, leaving tribal programs uncertain about their future. Similarly, in fiscal year 24, Congress rescinded $350 million for public health infrastructure at IHS. Unlike other federally funded healthcare services, IHS is still subject to sequestration. This uncertainty disrupts patient care. While we respect Congress's efforts to balance the federal budget, the IHS budget is too small to impact the national debt. Cuts do not save significant money, but cause real harm to tribal communities. We urge Congress to permanently exempt IHS from budget reductions. Protect tribal access to Medicaid. Medicaid plays a critical role in funding Indian health programs. For tribal facilities, 30 to 60% of funding comes from Medicaid, yet Indian country accounts for just 0.21% of total Medicaid spending. Capping Medicaid would not significantly reduce spending, but it would devastate facilities like ours, forcing reduction in patient care. In previous budget discussions, Congress exempted IHS and tribal programs from Medicaid caps. This protection must continue. Continued support for advanced appropriations We thank you for your commitment to advance appropriations for IHS, particularly the expansion of the healthcare facilities construction, sanitation facilities construction for fiscal year 27. We strongly support this proposal for continued support for IHS appropriations. Behavioral health. The fentanyl and opioid crisis are devastating Indian country. However, in fiscal year 24, Congress allocated just $2 million to fund detox services. That's less than $1 per IHS patient. We urge the subcommittee to dedicate resources to detoxification and emphasize the importance of protecting funding for alcohol, substance abuse, and mental health. Funding for tribal public safety and justice programs at the BIA. Like many tribes, we are seeing a drastic increase in drug trafficking and related crime on our lands. Congress needs to provide additional resources to the BIA to help us stem the flow of illegal drugs, investigate the crimes, and prosecute the offenders. BIA also needs to provide more flexibility in allowing officers to train state academies. We urge the subcommittee to vastly increase BIA public safety and justice funding, including for tribal law enforcement, detention, corrections, and tribal courts. Rockaboy's North Central Regional Water System, OMNR funding. We are still waiting to receive safe drinking water as part of our 1999 water rights settlement. As part of that settlement, the BIA is required to pay for the operation, maintenance, and repair of the new on-reservation water system. When the system is completed in the next few years, additional funding will be required for the BIA to meet its obligations. In conclusion, the federal trust obligation to Indian country is not optional. I urge the subcommittee to fully fund the IHS, tribal safety and justice programs, and water infrastructure, ensuring we can provide a healthy and safe community for our people. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, you're representing the Assiniboine.
Is that on? Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, respective members of the committee, Congressman Zinke. As Chairman Stiffarm mentioned, your connection with the Assiniboine people runs deep. We appreciate your support. My name is Ryan Rusche, and I'm here on behalf of Fort Peck Tribal Executive Board member Dana Buckles, who has the flu and was unable to attend today. Thank you for this opportunity to provide input of the Assiniboine and Sioux tribes of the Fort Peck Indian Reservation and the Assiniboine and Sioux Rural Water Supply System, the entity chartered by the tribes for the planning, design, construction, operation, maintenance, and replacement of the municipal, rural, and industrial water system that serves the Fort Peck Reservation and provides dry prairie rural water with a reliable source of water for the non-Indian communities surrounding the reservation. The law authorizing the system requires the Bureau of Indian Affairs to pay 100% of the OM&R costs of the project, and for fiscal year 2026, the project requires $4.965 million, a $460,000 increase over our expected fiscal year 2025 funding levels and OM&R funding. The most basic of governmental functions includes the delivery of clean, safe, and reliable drinking water. It's been an honor for me to work on this project, and it's an honor to provide reliable service to northeastern Montana, an area of 7,750 square miles, which will ultimately connect 3,200 miles of pipeline when completed next year. The system provides drinking water to an area larger than New Jersey, but just smaller than Massachusetts. The Fort Peck tribes also join all the tribal leaders here today in calling for stable and increased funding for the Indian Health Service, as well as the associated contract support costs for IHS. While funding for the Indian Health Service for the current year is far from certain, we remain hopeful that the subcommittee will remain committed to its funding proposed of $6.025 billion for the Indian Health Service for fiscal year 2025. Like much of Indian country, the Fort Peck Reservation has been plagued by opioid and fentanyl. One of the main symptoms of the crisis on the Fort Peck Reservation has been the corresponding rise in crime. Tribal law enforcement have seen an increase in crime across the board, but especially in property and violent crime, including sexual and other violent assaults, kidnapping, and homicide. Crimes at Fort Peck are being committed by and against every demographic within the community. As Congress has known for years, the most effective law enforcement is locally determined and administered and thus reflective of local values. As a former tribal prosecutor and elected county attorney, I can assure you I share Congress's view. In Indian country, that means tribally determined and tribally administered and reflective of tribal values. Ensuring safety of tribal members in the reservation community has been a top priority of tribal leadership, and Fort Peck has endeavored to maintain a strong tribal government. For more than 50 years, the Fort Peck tribes have had an independent judicial system, including an appellate court. The Fort Peck Tribal Court, incidentally where I began my career, includes law-trained judges and prosecutors, public defenders, probation officers, and experienced administrators and court reporters. Our tribal code is published online and in print and is publicly available. The Fort Peck Tribal Court exercises expanded jurisdiction and enhanced sentencing under the Violence Against Women Act and the Tribal Law and Order Act. Stable funding to continue this important work is vital to protect current and future generations within the tribal community. Additional support is also necessary to address the social conditions on the reservation that are interrelated with inadequately treated mental health and drug addiction. The crime rate and health disparities are inextricably intertwined with, for example, lack of housing on the reservation. In many cases, multiple families live in a single home. This means that exposure to illness and unhealthy behaviors is unavoidable for many people, most people, in fact, especially children. The BIA Housing Improvement Program, or HIP, is a critical tool in addressing this crisis. It helps the neediest within the tribal community. We urge the subcommittee to continue this important funding. An important tool in addressing housing problems is also the Tawahe Initiative, which includes a HIP component and provides greater flexibility and more effective delivery of services than traditional BIA programs. We encourage the subcommittee to increase the Tawahe Initiative program to benefit more tribes and trust tribes to wisely use Tawahe funds to address unmet and interim housing needs, as well as a host of other important governmental services for Indian country. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to our ranking member, the gentlewoman from Minnesota. You have any comment?
Just thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your support of Tawahe. The chairman from Red Lakes here who brought the idea to Congress, so I'm glad it's working so well for all of you. Thank you.
No, I'd just like to say thanks, and on behalf of Montana, there's a lot of problems out there. It's a big state. Sometimes when you live in a smaller state, you don't realize the expanse of what it means to have 7 law enforcement officers in 700,000 acres. And the time when by the time you call, it's already too late, and it's an hour and a half later, 2 hours, someone shows up. So I appreciate your travel, and of course, Assiniboine, Wawanga, Intacha, I honor that. So, do you have any further comments? Anyone? All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. All right, up is our next panel, panel number 8. Mr. Seneca, Carole Lankford, is she here today? I saw. There she is. Yep. And Jean Small. Mr. President, how are you, sir? Good to see you. How are you doing? Good to see you. Good. Good. As good as I can be. It's still in Congress. Our next panel, panel number 8, and that would include, we'll go with Carole. You're up first, representing the Great Flathead Indian Reservation.
Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, Congressman Zinke, thank you for this opportunity today, and good afternoon. My name is Carole Lankford, and I'm a member of the Tribal Council of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes of the Flathead Reservation. We appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts on addressing the challenges facing our tribal community and the subcommittee's commitment to improve the lives of our shared constituents. We believe that our top priority must continue to focus on mental illness and substance abuse. Nearly every member of our tribal community has felt the impact of mental illness and addiction. As fentanyl and opioids plague our communities, we must support our law enforcement, health and mental health professionals, and social service providers. We are an original self-governance tribe and have carried out all functions of IHS and BIA for many decades. We have similarly carried out functions of the EPA under the Treatment as a State amendments. Through local control and wise fiscal management, we have dramatically improved the quality of services to our community. We have demonstrated that local tribal management of federal obligations can result in significantly increased services to recipients through the elimination of the bureaucracy of red tape. Despite these efficiencies, however, we are often limited by available resources. Full funding for the Indian Health Service and additional funding for the Bureau of Indian Affairs is therefore a critical component to our ability to adequately address the crisis we are facing surrounding mental health and addiction. We are thankful for the forward funding of the Indian Health Service. Under our self-governance compact, we are able to draw down our entire budget in October 2024, alleviating the repercussions of financial freeze that occurred recently. Forward funding also ensures our ability to plan and effectively deliver services, as well as our ability to attract and retain qualified health and mental health professionals on our rural reservation. We believe forward funding models has proven to be an effective tool and should be extended to other Indian programs such as BIA and EPA. For many years, I have served as a member of the Lake County Drug Court, where I witnessed firsthand how appropriate support can help people lift themselves out of darkness and untreated mental illness and addiction. At CSKT, we are administering several cutting-edge programs to address the challenges. Some examples include development of a drug treatment court as a diversion to criminal charges pending before our tribal court, a reentry program that assists individuals returning to their communities after encounters with the criminal justice system, and streamlining the delivery of services through our participation in Tawahi Initiative. We are grateful for the subcommittee's support in these initiatives and are excited to see the positive outcomes that increased funding will have on our people. Of course, we cannot overlook the importance and bravery of our law enforcement professionals that keep our communities safe. Our law enforcement officers serve as the first line of defense in slowing the imports of opioids and illegal drugs to our reservation. We must ensure that these officers have the resource they need to protect our people. Accordingly, it is imperative to exempt tribal program funds and resources of Indian tribes from freezes or disruption in funding, and that changes in personnel within BIA and IHS are carried out in a manner that does not disrupt the delivery of services to our tribal communities and trust resources. The importance of such exemptions cannot be understated, especially as we continue to experience unprecedented drought conditions. These extreme conditions present threats to our land, water, and natural resources from fire and other natural disasters. Our reservation was reserved as a permanent homeland under the Hellgate Treaty of 1855 and encompasses our 1.2 million acres of timber, range, and farmland in western Montana, and is situated around the southern half of Flathead Lake, the largest freshwater lake west of the Great Lakes. Our reservation was ravaged by fire in 2021, 22, and 23. Without the subcommittee's support and the dedication of the subcommittee's committed staff, outcomes could have been much worse. I am proud of the CSKT Division of Fire, which provides a full host of fire management activities and has been in the front lines of defending our homeland against wildfire. We look forward to continuing the work of the subcommittee to address inadequate infrastructure, to support the evolving fire landscape, and to continue working to achieve parity for our tribal wildland firefighters. As Congress and the administration improve efficiencies within the federal government, they can look to the creativity of CSKT that combats wildfire with a militia comprised of employees from across the tribal workforce. Our tribal wildland fire militia is a vital part of our wildfire program during critical periods every summer. Now we must address this disparity that causes these dedicated personnel to remain ineligible for cost of living, retention pay, and other benefits enjoyed by federal employees. We have much work to do, and we face serious challenges ahead, but are extremely grateful for the subcommittee's commitment in addressing wildfire as we adapt to the loss of glaciers on our reservation and throughout our Aboriginal territory. Without glaciers, spring thaw and runoff patterns are evolving and present challenges for water, fire, and other emergency response managers. Changing snowfall patterns and drought conditions further exacerbate the challenge. We remain steadfast and committed to work with the subcommittee to improve fire management in these changing times. And we appreciate the subcommittee's demonstrated commitment and are grateful for our partnership. Thank you on behalf of the Tribal Council of Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes.
J.C. Seneca from the great Seneca Nation. I assume it's not a coincidence that your last name is Seneca.
No, no coincidence. No, just kidding. But no, thank you, Mr. Zinke. It's good to see you again. Welcome, members, and thanks for the opportunity for me to be able to be here today. I represent not only our people currently in this generation, but also my ancestors that have walked before me. Today I'm wearing a shirt that is made from a nudie cloth from our treaty of 1794 with the United States that was established in peace and friendship with our nations. And, you know, every year we receive this cloth from the United States in regards to recognition of that treaty, and so that stays intact. And so a lot of what's going on in today's political world, I'd like just to remind the committee of the commitment of the Six Nations, of the Seneca Nation, and the United States in this treaty of 1794, that we should be undisturbed in regards to our friendship and peace, and then also the commitments on the trust and treaty obligations of the United States and the Six Nations in regards to all this hoopla that's going on in regards to funding and cutting, to make sure that it's understood that those things should stay intact in regards to the Seneca Nation and the Haudenosaunee. So thank you for that. Nyawaiskano, I'm thankful that you are well. On behalf of the Seneca Nation, thank you for inviting me to provide comments today. The Seneca Nation is a constitutional democracy and the largest of the historic Six Nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Our lands are located in what is now western New York State between Lake Erie and Seneca Lake. Our nations have been in a political relationship of peace and friendship with the United States since 1794, when we signed the Canandaigua Treaty. This treaty supported the United States at a critical time in your history and aligned our warriors with yours to defeat the British during the War of 1812. Your governing tradition as a nation of separate sovereign states was influenced by our Confederacy. Congress acknowledged this in 1988, and it is why the U.S. Constitution specifically recognizes Indian nations as separate sovereign governments. For this reason, it is important to note that we are not a racial group, we are not part of any diversity, equity, or inclusion program, nor are we any part of any environmental justice program. We are sovereign nations of indigenous people. Because of this status, the federal funds and programs and employees that benefit federally recognized Native nations should be exempt from any broad-based executive orders and workforce reductions. The Seneca Nation supports the goal of reducing the size of the federal government, but people making these decisions need to remember the federal government's foremost treaty and trust obligations to our nations. We ask that the committee provide clarification to the federal agencies within your jurisdiction that the federal funding and employees related to programs that benefit Indian nations fulfills the federal government's treaty and trust obligations and should not be cut. Like the United States, the Seneca Nation has our own border crisis. We are experiencing a drug epidemic, primarily fentanyl, methamphetamine, which is killing our people at unprecedented rates. This epidemic is a result of non-Indian drug dealers who freely come into our territories and use them for strategic access to New York City. We share a border with the state of Pennsylvania and are in close proximity to the Canadian border. Drug cartels and dealers target our lands because of jurisdictional complexities and the lack of law enforcement resources. Drug dealers also target Seneca women, turn them to addiction and prostitution, and force them into pregnancies to cement their access to our land. Nation presidents, including myself, have issued executive orders to banish these people from our territories. Our own people have joined the effort, including a community group called the Seneca Mothers Against Drug Dealers, or SMAD, S-M-A-D-D. In addition to the drug epidemic, we have an influx of non-Indian homeless people coming into our territories. Over the nation's objection, Congress gave New York State criminal jurisdiction over our lands in 1948. But the federal government also retained its own criminal jurisdiction. As a result, the state views its law enforcement obligations to us as discretionary and not mandatory. And the federal government says it has limited resources and competing interests, which results in minimal attention to our problems. We need funding from the BIA to continue to support our own law enforcement efforts. We also need federal government to support interdiction efforts in Western New York and help us close our borders to the illicit drug trafficking. I also want to remind the committee of how important EPA funding is to Indian nations who rely on the agency's programs to monitor and protect our waters and land. Our people live downstream from a federal nuclear waste repository at West Valley. We also live in downstream from the city of Olean that regularly dumps raw sewage into our Allegheny River, and we suffer from long-standing contamination from the railways that go through our lands. For the Seneca Nation, EPA's Tribal Clean Water Act Section 106 program and the Brownfields Land Revitalization Program are vital for the monitoring and cleaning up pollution in our waters and land. We know that President Trump and his Department of Government Efficiency are wanting to drastically reduce the size of federal government, and that the EPA is one of those agencies they want to reduce. If the committee is looking to provide the EPA with some guidance on how to streamline programs and funding, we encourage you to direct the EPA to look at the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, commonly referred to Public Law 638 and Public Law 102-477, commonly known as 477 program. Both of these laws allow Native nations to coordinate and consolidate federal funding, provide more flexibility, and reduce administrative burdens. The Seneca Nation utilizes approximately 6 different programs at the EPA, and streamlining the process through self-governance at EPA would help our governments and yours. Lastly, it is important that Congress continue to fully fund Section 105L leases. We worry that in this environment of government reduction and efficiency, funding for Native nations will be ignored or cut. We appreciate the committee's continued work to ensure that this legal obligation is fully met each fiscal year, and we continue to ask this committee to help us advocate for Section 105L lease funding to become mandatory spending. The Seneca Nation has such a lease with the Indian Health Service, and we rely on that funding to help maintain our health facility. I want to thank you for your time and attention today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here before this committee. Yahweh.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now we'll turn to President Small from the great nation, the Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne.
Okay. Did you hear all that? Sorry, start over. Okay, all right. Okay, about 5,000 of our members reside on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, which is approximately 700 square miles and located in south central Montana in our ancestral territory. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in order to bring congressional attention to the law and order crisis plaguing our reservation and to suggest specific solutions to our committee can help put into action. You, as Congress, have the power to help fix the dangerous situation our people are enduring every day due to the insufficient federal law enforcement personnel and no functioning jail on our reservation. My testimony is focused on the lack of law enforcement and detention services, which the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Justice Services, or BIA-OJS, is legally obligated to provide on behalf of the United States. Our ask is straightforward. 1, the tribe needs $35 million for BIA to build a replacement adult detention center on our reservation, and 2, the tribe needs to increase of at least 20% in funding for BIA-OJS law enforcement services to recruit, hire, and retain more well-trained uniformed police officers. The public safety of our rural reservation is at an all-time low due to the underfunded law enforcement services and infrastructure currently being provided by BIA-OJS. Crime levels in our tribal communities have skyrocketed at least 800% over the past dozen or so years since BIA closed our on-reservation jail, and the number of officers dropped by half. Violent crime, property crime, drug trafficking, gun violence, human trafficking, murder, and missing Indigenous individuals. This is the reality our tribal families, children, and elders are living with. And it's not a coincidence. BIA OGS is falling down on the job and failing to fulfill the United States fiduciary duty under treaty and federal statutes to provide adequate law enforcement and detention services. When tribal members call 911 to report crimes, BIA OGS do not show up at all or arrive much too late. On the occasion when the officers do detain a suspect, they call the BIA contracted jail a full hour away from the reservation to find out if there is room to book someone. If there is no room in the jail, BIA OGS officers will unarrest the suspect and simply let them go. Just this past fall, an 8-year-old child was shot and killed in the crossfire of a drug-related incident. A few weeks earlier, BIA OGS received a call for service regarding discharge of a firearm at that same residence, but officers failed to respond. If officers had responded appropriately to their prior lesser offense, this terrible loss of a child's life might not have occurred. Such stories are so tragically common at the Northern Cheyenne, they're making national news. In 2023, CBS produced an entire podcast, Missing Justice, devoted to the law enforcement crisis at the Northern Cheyenne and focused on BIA OGS' bungled investigation of a murder that led to a false, not guilty verdict. Recently, NBC News broadcast a story about the drug crisis at Northern Cheyenne and other Montana reservations, in which the U.S. Attorney for Montana and former head of the USDEA admitted that more resources are badly needed. Which brings me to what those of you on this committee and Congress can do to restore the safety of the Northern Cheyenne people. BIA OGS needs greater appropriation to do its job. According to a report by the agency last year across Indian Country, BIA OGS is funded at less than 13% of total need. That is an overwhelmingly shortfall, and we're suffering the consequences at Northern Cheyenne. While fulfilling the entire gap, BIA OGS program may not be possible. Our asks are specific and achievable. First, Congress should appropriate $35 million in one-time capital funding to BIA to construct a new 80-bed jail at Northern Cheyenne. In 2023, BIA identified the existing 50-plus-year-old facility at Northern Cheyenne as the #1 tribal detention facility needing assessment for renovation or replacement. The old jail is in despair and not currently operational for adult detention. A fully functional on-reservation jail would enable officers to focus on getting criminals off the streets and keep officers on patrol rather than spending hours transporting detainees to and from the distant contracted facility, which itself is understaffed, overcrowded, and only partially operational. The recently completed BIA assessment found construction of a new jail on reservation rather than renovation of the old jail is the most cost-effective option. $35 million will allow BIA OGS to build a new 80-bed jail at Northern Cheyenne, which would substantially help address the crisis we are facing. Second, funding for the BIA OGS Northern Cheyenne agency must increase by at least 20% in order to bring staffing up to the level necessary to effectively deter and intercede in the astronomical crime rates plaguing our people. We need more boots on the ground, and we need them to stick around and invest in protecting our Northern Cheyenne communities. While the tribe is aware of the funding pressures that the subcommittee is operating under regarding the contract support cost and 105L leases accounts, we urge that these measures be designated as mandatory spending to provide headroom for the committee as it balances funding priorities for other critical programs funded by the bill. And again, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to testify. I plead with you to act so no more Cheyenne lives will be lost.
I'll turn it over to our ranking member for any questions from the great state of Maine.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for coming in late. We're all in so many different meetings today, but really appreciate your testimony, and thank you so much for bringing up the challenges you're facing on law enforcement. It's something we're just so inadequate at meeting the need, and the way you describe it is staggering. The idea that a child's life could have been saved perhaps if there was sufficient law enforcement, and the lack of detention facilities. I hope we can do more this year to help with that. It really is a serious problem everywhere, but your need sounds devastating. And thank you too. I heard some or most of your testimony, but certainly appreciate the part about the importance of the EPA, which is also funded through this committee, and the role it plays in overseeing the environmental protection in tribal lands. That's one of those things we just have to make sure isn't cut. And right now we are already seeing cuts that have been made, whether it's personnel loss or funding cuts. So it's something I'm really dedicated to making sure we get fixed. And sorry to miss your testimony, but I will have a chance to read about it. But thank you all so much for being with us today.
And from prevailing themes, I think testimony after testimony after testimony talks about funding and make sure we exempt Indian Territory from cuts in IHS or BIA or EPA, mostly along the lines of maintaining our treaty responsibility. You're a lot different. And Secretary Burgum's statement is you're not DIA, you're sovereign nations. And then review the law enforcement, and maybe it's time to look at the formula. When I know they had a DOJ program a few years ago, there was a lot of emphasis on that, and a lot of tribes transferred over to the DOJ program. That program lasted only for a few years, and then all of a sudden, that the formula and calculation of how much is required, and also take a look at what we face now is different than what we faced 20 years ago, and certainly we can figure out jurisdiction. So the advantage goes to law enforcement and not those who are breaking the law. Because if there's a jurisdiction problem, I guarantee you they know, probably more than our law enforcement. And although the last point is, although we've talked about it a lot and there's renewed emphasis on missing Indigenous, women, I haven't seen or heard a lot of improvement. When I was secretary, we had a task force that we brought together for that specific purpose, in coordination with the tribes. I thought that was effective. New secretary and new administration did not prioritize it. I'm hoping that the new administration will prioritize that again. It's helpful to get the word out that Indigenous women should be a protected, class of citizens and not abused, because the abuse is terrific. So I appreciate you being here. Is there anything else you'd like to say in testimony?
I just believe that more funding for the murdered and missing Indigenous women would be helpful. I know that's kind of like an unfunded mandate to, that was put out there, but then there wasn't much funding to go along with it. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank you on the bottom of my heart, and I appreciate you coming all the way to Washington, D.C. Mr. Chairman?
Hey.
And again, before I leave, Montana tribes, anything you want, just let me know. And Seneca, we'll include you in that as well.
We're Minnesota. We're ready to go.
Okay. Okay, Bruce, you're first.
Good afternoon. Chairman Simpson, ranking members Pingree, and respected members of the committee, I'm Bruce Savage, chairman of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, in Minnesota.
Thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for your continued dedication and support of Indian country. We have submitted written testimony highlighting our federal funds priorities for the fiscal year of 2026. We ask that this committee and Congress work to pass the budget that increases funding for Indian country to ensures that the federal funding provided to the tribes from the Department of Interiors and the Indian Health Services, as well as other agencies like the Department of Education, the EPA, USDA, and the Army Corps, continues to fulfill of the United States trust responsibilities. It is critical to understand Indian tribes receive funding from many federal agencies under numerous government programs, and those funds are essential for our tribal governments and are used to protect our people, our lands, and our resources. As you well know, and you have heard from tribal leaders over the years, the budget for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Education, and Indian Health Services are chronically underfunded, and the agency's ability to fulfill their trust obligations to the tribes have long suffered from understaffing. The band and our tribal citizens are concerned about the far-reaching impacts of the current federal funding freezes, terminations of probationary employees, and implementation of the deferred resignation program. It is our understanding the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Bureau of Indian Education have already lost approximately 200 probationary employees. These employees were providing social services, education, probate services, irrigation, oil and gas activities, and other direct services to the tribes, as well as held positions responsible for reviewing, approving needs of tribal actions. Those federal line officers are needed to discharge treaty and statutory obligations that the United States government has entered into with the tribes. Indeed, given the unique relationship that we have with the United States, we are still forced to rely on federal employees to process approvals for a wide variety of things that allow us to function and operate, like rights-of-ways, agreements, leases, contracts, ordinances, funding agreements, and more. We are already negatively impacted by the federal freeze on funding. Last year, through the BIA Transportation Program, we submitted 2 grant applications to repair 2 bridges within our reservation that provides access to our tribal members to reach their homes, their places of work, as well as support our economic development enterprises. We are informed by the BIA the 2 applications approved and sent to federal highways for funding. However, the funding is a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We were told that federal highways is not allowed to transfer the funding to our awards. This subcommittee has recognized the high need for and lack of infrastructure throughout Indian country. We urge you to continue to fight and push for the funding available to the tribes. The Fond du Lac Band also receives important federal funding from numerous other federal agencies like the EPA. The EPA funding is critical to supporting our local implementation and control of our natural resources within our reservation and our ceded territories. For example, we rely on the EPA funding to protect our air and water resources. We are concerned that the broad across-the-board cuts at the federal agencies like the EPA will have a detrimental impact on our ability to continue to carry out these programs. Federal funding and federal employees who administer both federal funding and federal programs under the Clean Water and Clean Air Act are essential in Indian country, especially in northern Minnesota. EPA funding in these areas is also historically insufficient to meet the needs of Indian country, including the band. We ask Congress to continue to support these programs and increase funding. I could go on, but I recognize my time is limited. However, it is important for you to understand that we as tribal leaders know you have a difficult road ahead of you, and we urge you to continue your work in upholding the trust responsibility and protecting federal funds and resources of it for Indian tribes. This is not an easy task, but we all rely on many federal agencies and funding streams that may not strictly relate to the designated Indian programs within the BIA or IHS, but the funding is critical to our operations and infrastructure. We urge you to continue your hard work in identifying these fund streams and protecting them, both as you continue to work for the current budget for fiscal year 2025 and begin on fiscal year 2026. I would be happy to answer any questions. Miigwech.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it. Darrell, you're next.
Okay. Is that on? Can you guys? Can you hear me? Okay. 아니, 보시오. So now basically the Shinikaza Jabamina Kazan. Migisin do dim. You do bashing mam's call coming saiganing me in the share. Give me great him nunguman to make Chicago Kigitoan. Chicago noon and ago. Jiminabe decision and Shinabe Minan and Timis call coming saiganing. Mig as a Gish square and Jabamina. Now I shall speak in my second language. Good afternoon to all of our friends here, Chair Simpson and the rest of the House Appropriations Subcommittee. I am Darrell Seki, Senior Chairman of Red Lake Nation. Chimiigwech for this opportunity to testify today. This is my third term as chairman. I am proud to say the subcommittee has always worked in bipartisan manner to do the best they can for Indian country. I believe all of you to continue this tradition. In my hand, I have the Red Lake Nation treaties, agreements, and it is the United States Constitution, Article 6, where the treaties are adopted, supreme law of the land. The outline on the Article 6, the promises that were made to tribes, I always end up in broken promises. Outlining the federal trust responsibility to my tribe is this United States Constitution. You must continue to enforce these agreements by providing robust funding for BIA, BIE, IHS, and EPA. Under Trump's first term, he proposed across-the-board cuts which range from 13 to 18%, depending on the agency. At the Interior, BIA, BIE's budget would have been cut by $465 million for fiscal year 2019, more than any other interior agency. We are now hearing that the administration may propose across-the-board cuts of 30 to 40% in fiscal year 2026, more than twice the level of his first term. When I testified before this subcommittee in 2018, you rejected the president's proposed cuts. Now I want to ask to each of you on this subcommittee if you are going to do the same for fiscal year 2026. On that note, I want to request this subcommittee to support 3 appropriations requests that would help improve the lives of Red Lake's 17,130 members. First, we support the Tribal Interior Budget Committee Council's recommendation for an additional $1.1 billion for tribal law enforcement, $1.1 billion for tribal courts, and $101 million for detention operations. We also asked the subcommittee to provide $8.5 million specifically for Red Lake to make us whole for the funding we had to pull from other critical programs to fulfill BIA's trust responsibility over the last 2 years. Red Lake is in the midst of an opiate crisis spurred by non-Indian drug dealers, significant shortfalls in BIA funding, and the fact that we cannot arrest and detain non-Indians. The 1978 Oliphant Law has to be overturned, and then the tribes will be able to prosecute and detain non-Indians who are killing our people due to these dangerous drugs that are selling in our reservation. The drug dealers know this, and they keep coming back at Red Lake's expense. Second, we request that we provide a $39 million increase in fiscal year 2026 as requested by Tribal Interior Budget Council to support the existing Tawahi tribes with 4 new Tawahi tribes, demonstration tribes, and 12 new Tawahi incubator tribes. Tawahi addresses many vital needs in our community, from youth suicide prevention efforts, allowing our Children's Healing Center to implement a 24/7 youth residential treatment program for mental health, substance abuse, efforts to combat tribal members' unemployment rates. Thanks to you, in 2023, BIA was able to onboard 4 more Tawahi sites, bringing the number up to 10 sites in 65 tribes. Last year, BIA was able to provide one-time funds to 12 Tawahi incubator sites to develop Tawahi implementation plans so that they will be ready to become full Tawahi sites when Congress provides additional funds. Third, we request financial assistance for Red Lake's crumbling water and wastewater infrastructure systems. Most of this infrastructure dates to the 1960s. And the lines are made of asbestos cement and are seriously deteriorating. Our projects have been unable to get on the IHS sanitation deficiency list because IHS prioritizes projects where houses are cramped together to provide more services per mile. This IHS policy unfairly harms Red Lake. We have nowhere else to go for financial assistance. We have 6 projects totaling $40 million that are shovel-ready, and we request this amount in FY 2026. And Chimigwes for allowing me to request your support and for some of the most immediate needs of my constituents. That includes 105 lease to be mandatory funded.
Thank you. Leonard, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the committee. My name is Lenny Fineday, and I'm honored to serve as Secretary-Treasurer of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. My testimony today focuses on full advance appropriations for Indian Health Services, funding for the BIA's Tawahi Initiative, and the need to protect existing grants awarded by the EPA from impacts of the executive orders. Regarding IHS advance appropriations, we support the many requests that you'll hear this week to move Indian health, education, and justice programs to the mandatory side of the budget. Health, education, and public safety are the foundations of the government's treaty and trust obligations to our people, and mandatory spending is the long-term goal. However, considering the current budget situation, we ask you continue to improve on your work to provide advance appropriations for Indian health. This subcommittee, under Congressman McCollum's leadership, played a key role in the historic enactment of advance appropriations for Indian health care in the fiscal year 23 omnibus. The FY25 House Interior Bill expands advance appropriations for IHS to include sanitation and healthcare facilities construction. In FY26, to build on that progress and to fully protect Indian health programs from the impacts of potential government shutdowns, we urge you to add contract support costs and 105L leasing funding to the advance appropriation accounts for Indian health care. Another priority for Leech Lake is the Tawahi Initiative and our efforts to protect our children and keep our families together. The Tawahi Initiative fosters tribal self-governance and acknowledges that Indian tribes, as local decision makers, are best suited to develop plans to resolve problems that have plagued our communities. Interior's Tawahi report to Congress is proof that investments in Tawahi are working. The report confirms that the initiative has led to reductions in suicides and recidivism and is improving family reunification, language revitalization, housing, and job creation. Leech Lake was added as a pilot tribe last year. In one short year, the Tawahi Initiative is helping us break down long-standing barriers in our foster care system, ensuring more Native children can remain in our community. We're renovating modular homes to provide safe, stable housing for foster families, and we are implementing these services with job training, financial literacy education, and job placement. To build on the success of the Twahi Initiative, Leech Lake supports a TBEX budget request that the initiative be funded at $83.6 million in fiscal year 2026. Finally, I want to discuss the importance of EPA programs and grants to Indian country. Tribes nationwide are concerned that executive actions relating to diversity and environmental justice are adversely impacting federal programs and grant awards. We urge the subcommittee to include bill language to clarify that federal programs and services, including grants that have already been awarded that are designed to meet the government's treaty and trust obligations, are exempt from the recent executive actions and hiring policies. While some agencies have clarified that tribal programs are exempt from the executive actions, this clarification hasn't been uniform across all federal agencies. While some agencies, Leech Lake remains concerned that the executive actions could impact other agencies, including EPA's Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grant Program. While this grant has all the buzzwords that raise flags for the recent executive actions, this grant has nothing to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and everything to do with a federal responsibility to protect our treaty rights and the health and safety of our employees. This grant is critical to helping us overcome a decades-long effort to move a tribal government facility out of a Superfund site. Leech Lake established our Division of Resource Management to protect our treaty resources, including our sacred Menomen, our forests, and the fish and wildlife that continue to feed our people to this day. The facility that houses our DRM employees is located wholly within the St. Regis Superfund site. Employees are exposed to contaminated soil and water every day. Despite the importance of this grant, we remain concerned that it's wrongly getting caught up in the executive actions. I could spend hours talking about the need to remove the source of this contamination and the plague of the St. Regis Superfund site on our community, but I know that my time is short, so I'll close with this. As someone who grew up skeptical of government actions and overreach, I'm strongly committed to efficiency and accountability. Given the federal obligation to tribes and the many federal programs that serve tribes, I believe that all tribes share in this commitment to accountability. However, the one-size-fits-all approach taken so far comes with far too many unintended consequences while instilling fear and uncertainty in our communities. Our primary concern is that the people charged with implementing these efficiency efforts have no background in history or law about the government's treaty and trust responsibility to Indian country. So we are calling on this subcommittee and others in Congress to stand with us to uphold these solemn obligations. Miigwech.
Thank you. Virgil?
I'm going to try to get every second out of that clock. No, I'm just kidding. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and McCollum. My name is Virgil Wind, and I am honored to serve as the Chief Executive of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, a federally recognized Indian tribe located in central Minnesota. I come before you today carrying the voices of my people. Mille Lacs is a sovereign nation with more than 5,000 band members, and we provide jobs and services that support thousands more across Minnesota. Band members and non-band members alike benefit when we do better, and we have and we will continue to be good neighbors. Like all tribal nations, we stand on the promises made in our treaties, promises that must be upheld. I am not here simply seeking money. I'm here seeking longer, healthier, better lives for my people. This is not just a budget request. It is a matter of life and death. Our people are dying younger than other Americans. Our elders, the ones who carry our language, who carry our traditions, who carry our history, are being taken from us far too soon. Families are burying loved ones because they couldn't get the care they needed. This isn't just statistics. It's names, it's faces, it's voices that should still be here today. When thinking about life expectancy of a Native American male across the United States, 65.2 years, right? My life is over halfway over.
That compared to our non-native counterparts of 76.4 years, it's 11 years difference. This is a tragedy that is preventable. We can make a difference. While we have many diverse needs, I'm here today seeking the support of 5 key issues. First, we need full funding for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, and Indian Health Services. This is not, again, not just a budget request. It is a call to honor the federal government's trust responsibility. Tribal programs are already underfunded. Our people face some of the worst health disparities in the country, higher rates of diabetes, heart disease, and preventable deaths. And yet, just to put something in perspective, the federal government spends nearly twice as much on health care for people that are incarcerated than we spend on our Native Americans. Roughly $3,600 goes to a Native American compared to over $9,000 for somebody that's incarcerated. Back to IHS, the Great Lakes IHS region, the one that serves my people, it is the lowest funded IHS region in the country. That has to change. If we want to reduce government spending in the long run, then invest in our health now. Healthy people contribute to their communities. They work, they thrive, they pass on knowledge, they pass on culture to the next generation. Second, I urge you to continue supporting advanced appropriations. Every year, our communities are left wondering whether or not Congress will pass a budget, will services be cut off, will health care be disrupted? Other federal agencies get advanced appropriations so that they can keep operating when there are delays. We need that same stability for IHS. Healthcare is not something that can just pause. People's lives are on the line. Third, we need increased funding for tribal law enforcement. Our Mille Lacs tribal police keep our communities safe, fighting against drugs, violence, and human trafficking, but the funding from the Department of Interior covers less than 3% of our law enforcement budget. Our annual budget is over $6 million, and we receive less than 3% funding from the Department of Interior. In fact, $181,441 is all we receive through self-governance. This is not anywhere near the funding we need. Fourth, we support the funding requests of the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. Our people have cared for the lands and waters of the Great Lakes for centuries, and we continue to practice our treaty rights today. Fishing, hunting, and gathering are the traditions that make us who we are as a people. We support the fair share of no less than $50.79 million for the rights protection implementation and at least $368 million for the Great Lakes Restorative Initiative, with no less than 5% set aside for tribal programs. And finally, we ask that you encourage your colleagues to continue funding the Treasury's Office of Tribal and Native Affairs. This office plays a critical role in ensuring tribal nations have access to federal resources and economic opportunities. It must remain a priority. Chimigwech, thank you guys. Thank you for your time and attention, and always happy to help. Miigwech.
Thank you all for your testimony and for being here today. You say if the life expectancy has gone down like 7 years or something like that, that you'd be halfway. If it was me, I'd be dead. So that's how old I am. So I'm going to actually turn the time over to Congresswoman McCollum.
Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, for all of your testimony. And I want to thank the tribes of Minnesota, especially the Anishinaabe tribes, who took me on a voyage when I was the state legislature, when the Mille Lacs hunting and fishing and treaty rights were in dispute. So it is a great honor and privilege to work alongside you in this work that I do. Chairman, from Red Lake, really, Chilwahe is a huge success, and I know you came into my office and we weren't sure what was going to happen, and it has happened, and it is a model that has gone all over, with each tribe adjusting it to fit its culture and its needs. So it was an ingenious program, not only that has helped tribal nations in Minnesota, but all around. Two things I wanted to bring up. One is more broader picture for all the tribes, but I always look to you for guidance on what you think I should be working on behalf of the Minnesota tribes. You mentioned sequestration. There's no protection for sequestration. And the advanced appropriations, we're not so sure how that's going to be treated because of the way the language in sequestration was written originally. We thought it protected tribal health, only to find out that it didn't. I wish it protected tribal education as well, too. I hope not to be in sequestration. I know it's the chairman's goal, too, as well as Chairman Cole. But I'm wondering if some of us should be thinking ahead and getting something on the floor to see if we can pass it ahead of time in case we find ourselves in that kind of unimaginable position again. You speak on behalf of your nations. I was at NCAI and kind of spoke to other tribal nations. But are you concerned about that? Is that something we should be looking at doing?
Certainly, that's what needs to be done for Indian country for this help, for help IHS. Because there's always funds needed because when it trickles down to a service unit, all they get is crumbs. We need more health care for our people. Instead of we have our own health care in our tribe, but we got to use our health care to cover for IHS, the shortfalls.
Okay.
We need more doctors, nurses, dentists. We're not funded enough. So you guys got to do the right thing. Because of the treaties, trust responsibility, all categories they all spoke about.
Okay.
Before us, and now, all the ones that I spoke, you guys got to do the right thing. Miigwech.
Yes. The other item, and it's kind of a Minnesota specific thing, and I might need your help on this, Chairman, because I had to go in front of the Biden administration with my brothers and sisters from the tribal organizations, the 4 walls. So, which is very unique in Minnesota, and that allows the tribal nations to use some of their funding, very little of it, but they use it wisely, to be able to go out in the community and talk about health care, talk about mental health, talk about substance abuse, talk about treatment. But that you have to have like a carve out or permission to do that. And I'm concerned about this administration seeing how well that's worked. If one or two of you could just take a minute and explain it to the chairman and to the ranking member, who I will need to have allies in this, because I know this is something you want to see continued.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman McCollum. And the issue of 4 walls relates to statutory definition within the Social Security Act of clinic services for Medicaid reimbursement that tribes receive. This is an example of IHS underfunding and tribes being innovative in the way that we're providing health care to our people by seeking reimbursement from CMS. In 2016, CMS issued a bulletin that said that all clinic services must be provided within the 4 walls of a clinic, which is part of the statutory definition of clinic services. The way that CMS had been operating for at least 2 decades prior to that was that they allowed tribes to bill for these services outside the 4 walls of a clinic. And that's the way that all of the tribes in Minnesota in particular have developed their healthcare systems, is that we provide services particularly with regard to substance use disorder and behavioral health outside of the 4 walls of a clinic. And so we have been working very closely with the Minnesota Department of Human Services as well as with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services under the Biden administration to come up with a regulatory fix for this. And right now it's sort of an open question on what's going to happen. I know that Minnesota DHS had some Medicaid state plan amendments that they had gotten into CMS right at the last minute in December. I'm not 100% 100% sure if those have been signed off on yet. The last that I had heard was that they didn't get signed off on before January 20th, and everything was on hold until new leadership got in at CMS. And so we're still kind of in limbo on that. And so we will probably be looking for some clarification on clinic services that will allow the tribes in Minnesota to continue to get those reimbursements. Miigwech.
So thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, working with the Native American Caucus, I might be looking to do a letter. This also could be a model that could save lives as well as more efficient use of healthcare dollars in tribal nations. But we're concerned about that moving forward. So thank you all for your mentorship. And you'll let me know if I'm not doing it right. I know that. So
I just want to recognize you for what you do. And I want to piggyback on what he's talking about CMS and the third-party collections we do. But it seems like every time the tribe is doing something good for them, for their people, it's taken away. That's what happens. We're doing good with these four walls, doing the collections, the shortfalls that are needed. It helps tribes. Now it's working. Now they want to take it away. I ask you guys again, do the right thing. Be good.
We're not. No, we're not contiguous. We have different districts that are, 50 miles apart from one another. So to have a big healthcare facility in all three of those districts is not something that's really feasible. So Four Walls puts even tighter constraints on that level. And then you tie in the opioid epidemic and all of that stuff to it. And what does that outreach really look like when you're segmented? You know what I mean? So it just makes it even more difficult to be able to provide those services. Congrats.
We're located near Duluth, Minnesota, and all of these tribes we service at our clinics too, and offer those same possibilities to participate in these programmings for all federally recognized Native people that live within the Western Great Lakes region.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. We're always pleased that Representative McCollum is on this committee and has chaired this committee because she's the true Minnesotan. But I'd just like to remind everyone I was born in Minnesota, Yashri Betcha, and my family has a lake home in Glen, Minnesota, and so I have visited with the Mille band before, and I'm looking forward to taking my grandchildren to the museum and gift shop that you have, because it's a wonderful, it's a great little spot. But also very supportive of all the things you've talked about today, and thank you for reinforcing the, one of the most difficult things that is underfunded, and that is the law enforcement and the huge impact it has. And every year the statistics get somewhat worse and more staggering, and I really think we, in spite of all the huge pressures we're going to have this year and trying to figure out how to make sure this budget goes through, this funding bill goes through, but just getting those numbers up is really important. And, of course, the health measures as well, really just awful the way it continues to get worse. And I just want to reinforce, a couple of you mentioned funding that's been blocked. I think you had a couple of transportation projects you brought up, and I don't know if Representative McCollum was in the room when that happened, but I think we're all trying to keep our eye out for those places where there is a block, and make sure you continue to keep us informed about if the funding comes through. We've been told some of it's going to be released, and you also mentioned that I think it's a climate justice grant that you're trying to use for a Superfund site. It's the second time I talked to a tribe about that today. The other one was really a land purchase, so it's not, these buzzwords unfortunately are endangering a lot of programs, but many of us feel this was money that was appropriated, authorized by Congress. It shouldn't be blocked. Yeah, and these are contracts with the government. So continue to keep us informed about it, because we're going to be fighting to make sure that money eventually goes through. It's hard enough to get enough money through the BIA and BIE, but then you get these other grants through the EPA and other, HHS. They're all, and anyone that's being blocked, this is not DEI, it's not environmental justice. These are parts of our treaty and trust responsibility.
If I could, you mentioned transportation in Indian country, and Late 1990s, I was researching insurance, and AAA did a seatbelt survey across the country. And what they discovered that you have 2/3 of a higher chance of dying if you live and work within any reservation within the country due to lack of infrastructure on roads.
Interesting. I know that. I know that Chairman Cole, when he was chairman of the Transportation Committee, was very dedicated to making sure that that portion in there that goes to Indian roads was increased and stuff. And he kind of went and said, how much has this overall increase been? How much has it been in Indian country? And it was about half of what the overall, so he bumped it up substantially. So it's something we're aware of. I know that when Betty and I were in Arizona and on the Navajo reservation, and they drove us out to a school, we both had Fitbits on. They drove us out, and it wasn't that far, but you know, it was a few miles. I got like 26,000 steps just riding on the bus. Yeah, but she got more. That's how bad the road was. So we're aware of that, and we'll continue to work on that. But I do appreciate all of your testimony.
I got a quick comment. You know, the statute, map 21 needs to be changed on transportation.
Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We could have sat here for hours.
Yes.
I know. I know what you mean.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Winna? You can give me the rest of my Coke in there. Winna? And Jeff. Jeff and Winna? You must be Jeff. Yes. Okay. Is that how you say it?
Correct.
Winna? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Winna, you're up first.
Is that on? Yep. Okay, great. Hawaii. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify again on behalf of the Quapaw Nation. My name is Weena Supernaw, and I am the chairperson of the nation. Once again, I am here today to ask that the United States, through this committee, help close a dark chapter in our history. Almost immediately after the establishment of our reservation, up through the 1960s, the Bureau of Indian Affairs oversaw the systematic removal of virtually all valuable natural resources from our reservation. The Bureau authorized mines on our land that from 1917 to 1947 alone produced more than $20 billion worth of lead and zinc. Our tribe hardly saw a dime. The pillaging of our resources alone was devastating, but that's not even the worst of it. The Bureau's haphazard authorization of mines was so shoddy that now much of the land on our reservation, in fact the entire town of Pitcher, Oklahoma, is so undermined that it is unsafe for habitation. That's still not all. The BIA also authorized the mining companies to dump their toxic waste on our farms and on our fields. Some of these piles are over 80 to 90 feet high. The Bureau of Indian Affairs didn't just allow our resources to be stolen, they also allowed our reservation to be poisoned for generations. Our pleas for justice fell on deaf ears for more than 100 years. But finally, in 2012, a Congress member from the state of Oklahoma with a deep understanding of our history stepped in. I'm incredibly grateful that this outstanding champion for Indian country, Congressman Tom Cole, now has the distinguished honor of chairing this very committee. Congressman Cole introduced legislation that gave the Quapaw Nation and our co-claimants the ability to seek restitution from the United States in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims for the damages alleged in the case of Thomas Charles Bear et al. Versus the United States. We had a historic opportunity and worked diligently with the co-claimants and the United States to come to an agreement. And on January 9th, 2020, the court entered a historic settlement of the Bear case. The court recommended that the nation and our co-claimants receive $137.5 million in compensation for the damages. The funding would help us address the generations of damage to our land and trauma to our people. Sadly, I'm here today because more than 5 years later, the Quapaw Nation and our co-claimants have not been made whole, but we persist. After months of work and negotiation with our co-claimants, we reached agreement on legislation that would authorize the U.S. to fulfill its end of the bargain and provide funding the court determined we are owed. Senators Mille and Lankford, as well as your colleague, Congressman Josh Burkeen, introduced legislation to fulfill this important obligation. Now we are here to ask that you work with our congressional delegation to help our nation recover from the losses we have suffered and will continue to suffer for years to come because of the BIA's mismanagement of our lands. I ask that you join the Quapaw Nation and our co-claimants in demanding the U.S. to finally live up to its trust and treaty responsibilities. An appropriation to settle the Bear case will not undo all the damage, but it will help us move forward. Thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to testify before you today. Ganake.
Thank you. Jeff.
Sioux, Chairman Simpson.
Yep.
Ranking Member Peck. I'm sorry about that. My name is Jeff Wakachi. I'm chief of the United Kootenai Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma. The UKB is a federally recognized tribe requiring at least 1/4 degree of Cherokee blood. We are headquartered on our Oklahoma Cherokee Reservation in northeastern Oklahoma. The UKB has been federally recognized since 1946 and has struggled for 79 years to receive our rights and benefits. For decades, our legal status has been debated. That debate was settled on January 17th when the Interior Solicitor issued a memorandum opinion that reaffirmed what we have always known. The United Kootenai Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma and the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma are equal successors to the historic Cherokee Nation. This conclusion was reached after more than 2 years of in-depth legal, historical, and genealogical review of documents submitted by both tribes. We are confident that the federal courts will easily affirm Interior's correct conclusion. In the early 2000s, the CNO assumed key IHS programs related to the Tahlequah Service Unit. IHS unlawfully awarded a 638 contract to the CNO for clinical services and purchase referred care, despite knowing that the UKB had never given consent. As a result, UKB members have been denied health care services. The CNO knows this, and the IHS knows this. This was not a technical oversight. It was a breach of trust. In 2022, we began our most recent efforts to obtain recurring funding from the IHS to establish our long overdue tribal health system. After reviewing this history, IHS confirmed that the UKB is entitled by law to operate our own tribal health system and proposed securing it under the new tribes funding budget line in both the FY24 and 25 budget requests. IHS's responsibility is clear. It must provide health care to all federally recognized tribes, regardless of how long they have been recognized. The new tribes funding budget exists for this exact reason, to ensure all tribes receive services. Any claims that UKB funding is redundant or patently false and not worthy of consideration. IHS has now acknowledged its error and seeks to correct it. This effort resulted in an ISDA contract which transferred $5.7 million in non-recurring funding to the UKB for 2024. We are working with the service to obtain non-recurring funding for 2025. The 2024 funding is entirely within the PRC funding program. The recurring funding request of $6 million would be allocated by the UKB across both the PRC program and the hospitals and clinics program. Recurring funding for the UKB has been included in both the FY24 and 25 President's budget requests with bipartisan support in both chambers. Unfortunately, the UKB was not included in the 2024 enacted budget as the final budget held IHS funding stagnant. We were again included in the 2025 President's budgets under Biden, and the Senate included language in one of its reports that directed the IHS director to fund the UKB out of a total budget increase for the service of just over $8 million. That bill ultimately died. We have shown our ability to operate high-quality health programs under ISDA, successfully managing behavioral health and substance abuse services throughout our reservation with the annual funding, IHS funding, in the amount of $99,000. Our track record of efficient operations and prudent management under this contract proves our ability to transform that meager funding into a behavioral health system which now operates across 5 locations and provides services to 1,200 plus patients. We stand ready to replicate this success with the United Kootenai Tribal Health System. As you continue through these hearings, take note that only one tribal official is here to oppose another tribe's funding. Very sad indeed. On behalf of the United Kootenai of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma, I urge you to correct this moral and legal error and enact the IHS's request to fund the UKB on a recurring basis. Would
Thank you. The lawsuit you're talking about, where did that, was it the tribe against BIA?
Yes, yes.
Because we have a lot of, and I and my staff, and they've been trying to educate me a little bit, which is sometimes hard. But there are settlements that happen across this government that all of a sudden go over to the Department of Justice, and the Justice Fund pays for those. And I'm trying to figure out why some of them go there and why others don't, and how the hell we get it out of my budget and get it into the Justice Fund to pay for it. That's a challenge, and I've got to do some more research on it and stuff. And but it is, if a judgment's been made.
And at least we did get the reference from the judge in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims that at least referred it for legislative authorization and appropriation.
Yeah.
So we're happy about that, but like you, that's a bit of a mystery to me as well.
It's kind of, and from what I understand, and I might get this wrong, but if an appropriation has been requested, in some of them they have to request an appropriation, and if that's been done, it can't come out of the Justice Fund. So, is that similar to what I'm something like that? Yeah. So it's something that I want to look at, not just in this case, but what's going to eat our budget up in coming years is there's a lot of water right settlements across this country with tribes. I was just talking with Fort Belknap tribe and stuff, and there's this almost it is actually a little over $1 billion, which is like over a 10-year period, but that's still huge hit on the budget, and there's going to be more and more of those coming down the line. We've got to figure out a way to pay for these. So anyway, I appreciate your testimony, and thank you for your testimony, and look forward to working with you to solve the issue. Ms. Pingree?
Yeah, thanks. I'm so sorry about, the exploitation and really the story that you're bringing to us, and hope that we can find a way to make sure that that settlement finally gets to the people who deserve it. And it sounds like the funding has come 1 year, but not all years.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
non-recurring. Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to learn a little more about that, and thank you for your, your work on behalf of your tribe and getting the health care to the people who need it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. He said non-recurring, like
Yes.
my brilliance. It kind of comes and goes. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose. Tribal Utility Authority Director. That's
Heck of a title.
I was going to say, you're going to have to explain to us exactly what that is.
I would be happy to.
Okay, Ken, you're first.
I may have to deviate from my script here for that.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, instead of looking at a piece of paper, maybe I'll just talk to you. So I'm Ken Amon. I'm the Tribal Utility Authority Director for the Cashel-Dehe Band of Wintoon Indians of the Colusa Rancheria. That's a mouthful, so we just call it the Colusa Tribe. It's about an hour north of Sacramento in California. I've worked for this tribe for about 20 years, and the reason that I showed up to the reservation back in 2004 was because the tribe experienced over 50 power outages per year from the IOU, and unfortunately this isn't uncommon across Indian country. The tribes didn't get the last pick of land, they got no pick of land, right? So oftentimes end up in the most rural and remote areas across the country, and very often are underserved by the IOUs. In fact, 1.4% of Americans have no access to electricity, but in Native America, that number is 14%, 10 times the national average. 13,500 plus families in the Navajo Nation never had access to electricity in America in 2025. So this is not uncommon. So when I showed up to Colusa, it was to help them build a natural gas-fired cogeneration power plant to take the control of their own energy future. And super long story short, we've had an off-grid microgrid powering the entire reservation now for 2 decades with no outages in over 13 years, which makes this little tribe in Northern California a global leader in utility uptime. And so we formed Colusa Indian Energy, a Section 17, 100% tribally owned corporation, the only tribally owned microgrid developer in the country to export these decades of expertise to any other tribes who might be able to benefit from it. Tribal energy sovereignty is a big buzzword in Indian country these days. And so we bring energy sovereignty to, now we're in development with nearly 60 different tribes across the country, also some non-tribal governments and big corporations, including some of the largest data center clients in the world. And so what I'm here to talk to you about is specifically not just what we've done at Colusa proper, but what it is we offer not only to Indian country, but to the United States government and to industry as a whole. And there are a few things that I think you guys might be able to help us out with in achieving that. So my testimony today will focus on the offices, programs, and policies which tribes rely upon to seek and secure energy independence, diversify their economies away from gaming, build more vibrant communities, and help America maintain its global computing and energy dominance. As members of the subcommittee know, tribal governments are forced to seek approval from the BIA for a wide array of activities on trust lands, including energy generation, storage, transmission, and related projects. Well, the Hearth Act of 2012 made great advances in self-determination of tribes. More work is yet to be done. There are still limitations on how federally recognized tribes utilize their lands. Fewer restrictions on government agency approvals will allow tribes to accelerate development and attract more private capital to fund these initiatives. More private capital will allow tribes to grow without relying on government grants and loan guarantees. I'd like to recognize the importance of the Office of Indian Energy within the Department of Energy. We partnered with this office on several projects at Colusa and elsewhere. The Office of Indian Energy provides technical expertise, funding, and serves as a one-stop shop for tribes seeking to develop their energy resources. These resources were vital in developing our own microgrid in Colusa, and grant funding can help tribes take their initial steps towards energy self-sufficiency. This office is instrumental in connecting tribes with DOE resources, such as the system of national labs, other technical resources, and programs. The House fiscal year 2025 Energy and Water Bill provides a historic $95 million to Indian energy policy and programs at the DOE, which is a 35% increase over fiscal year 2024. We're grateful for your continued support for this office and urge the committee to continue that commitment as you develop the 2026 bill. We hope that those members of the subcommittee who also serve on the Energy and Water Subcommittee will bring their expertise related to tribal issues to that role as well. We also hope subcommittee members will bring their expertise and guidance to the DOE's Loan Program Office. This program had significant potential to improve the capital flows into Indian country energy projects. However, the application process was cumbersome, which made it almost impossible for any tribes to take advantage of the program. Further, the complex and costly due diligence assessment of projects made the smaller community-scale projects impossible to fund using this program. This program has a massive opportunity in promoting both new natural gas-fired generation and renewable energy resources. America needs significant power capacity to lead the world in computer processing, artificial intelligence, and other high-tech manufacturing endeavors. The LPO, in my opinion, has been an abject failure, and there's a $2 billion fund originally that was expanded to $20 billion, set aside only for tribes to be able to access super low interest funding for energy projects and manufacturing. But there wasn't a single loan that was actually successfully completed. And I'm afraid that the LPO may end up on the chopping block under this new administration. I hope that it doesn't. There are a lot of ways to improve the way that LPO functions and actually get this money out into the hands of tribes that can benefit from it. Tribal energy tax issues specifically, the investment tax credits included in Section 48 of the Internal Revenue Code, which was expanded by Congress in 22, presented tribes with a critical opportunity to develop microgrid projects on their own reservations. The formation of the company that I told you about, Colusa Indian Energy, was predicated partially on that investment thesis. This tax incentive initially supported natural gas cogeneration and non-carbon energy generation systems, offering cost savings, carbon reductions, and improved energy reliability across the country. A key feature for tribes is the direct pay option, which allows tribes to be able to benefit from ITCs as a non-taxable entity. This removes financial barriers and enables investment in large-scale power generation projects without requiring tax liability. My time is short, so you have to read the rest of what I wrote here. Specifically, what I want you to take away from what we're doing is we have two large buckets of projects. One is community-scale microgrids, similar to what we do or have done at Colusa. We're doing this for dozens of other tribes across the country. Those projects, almost across the board, rely on the ITC, which is set to expire, or part of it has expired already. The combined heat and power, the natural gas component expired in 24. And grant dollars from agencies like the Office of Indian Energy. The other big bucket of work that we're doing is to lever the advantages that tribes have in sovereignty and being self-regulating to bypass state and local bureaucracy and bring large energy users like AI data centers to reservations to be powered directly by tribes. So if you want to build a data center in PG&E territory today in Northern California, it's going to take 7 to 10 years to get that transmission power. We do it on trust land with tribes in 18 to 24 months. And so this is that we take an all the above energy approach here. We're not a renewable energy company, we're a tribal energy company. And so natural gas plays a critical component to these large scale projects, which not only offer tribal energy sovereignty, but offer significant revenue opportunity to diversify away from gaming. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, sir.
Is it on? There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Jose Simon III, but my tribal name is Moke Simon. Amenehi Kalaktak, Moke Simon. So nice to meet you today. I'm the chairman of the Middletown Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians in Northern California. We have 261 tribal members, so a small tribe coming to the table. We are a neighbor of Colusa. We're less than an hour away in Northern California. I've been the tribal chairman since 1997, joined as a young man. I grew up on the reservation in Middletown with an 80-acre parcel that we live on there now with our tribal members. I was lucky enough to be not a small person, so I was able to play college football, played in the NFL, played in the World Football League, was a champion over there, played Arena Football League, but I was asked to come back and be a leader of the tribe. I've done that for over 24 years now. Will be 30 at the end of this term. And today I come to you as a leader to say, please continue the mandated funding, or turn it to mandating funding for all the tribal organizations I'm looking on the wall. BIA, US EPA, US Forest Service, Indian Health Services, all underfunded throughout the years that I've been there, but cutting the funding completely would just be devastating, especially for our small tribal nation. We need to drive 34 miles just round trip to get to a hospital. So we've worked over the last 20 years to build a clinic actually on our rancheria. We are part of a consortium, but we have built something on our rancheria now that we need funding for to get up and operating and started. We're just looking for a hand up, not a handout, as we're moving forward as a tribal nation. But we have grants under each one of those things that we have up on the wall. EPA, U.S. Forest Service under our Tribal Historic Preservation Office, Indian Health Service, EPA, we have our water quality grants. We are working diligently too. We are affected by PSPS events in Northern California from PG&E. We're working on microgrid projects, solar for all of these things that will affect our people. But we're a small nation, very small nation. As I said, we have 261 members. We have about 33 adult or elder members, and we just live in a different environment than I've heard any of the testimony here. We have just grown our nation from 80 acres to 353. We've done some trust status acquisition. We had to pay for those properties to get that put into trust. It was a 9-year process for a small tribe. And some folks in this country think you get it and it's tribal land immediately. Well, that's not the process to go through. You not only have to buy the land back that was taken from us in 1851, August 21st, in the Peace Treaty that was signed in Lake County, but we have to also pay taxes on that while we're going through the fee to trust process. It's a scary environment when you have a world pandemic hit. You need to close your businesses for safety reasons. You need to try and take care of your surrounding community and continue to grow. But there's a long process. For years, I've heard as a leader about streamlining applications. You heard earlier in the testimony, there's grants and loans out there, but the process to go through it is just unbelievable. And once again, it's overlooked on the sovereign status of tribal nations. The first thing they want in there is a waiver of sovereign immunity. From each federal government, each federally recognized tribe, it can't be taken away, but we can give it away. And we do not want to give away our sovereign status. And sovereign waivers of immunity are in all the contracts that were talked about earlier, in this testimony and across the board. It's a real challenge. We're making headway at the state level. At the federal level, we need to be looking at that too. Over-the-counter applications, whether it be FEMA, EPA, U.S. Department of Forestry, whatever, those challenges are hard to overcome for small tribes with a minimum capacity, but we're continuing to take steps forward by growing our economic diversification in energy, broadband, and other opportunities. But the grants stand to be the starting point for most of our projects as we move forward, whether it's land purchase, whether it's, like I said, any of our economic diversification that we do for the Middletown Rancheria. And really want to make sure that we are not caught up in the conversation going on with DEI, any other things. That funding needs to follow through. For Middletown, we probably get about $500,000 a year in granting on a regular basis. That would include all of our 638 contracts, EPA, other things, and we do a good job locally to create other businesses. We do have gaming operations, we have fueling station, we have other things where we employ over 300 people in the local area. A local area that was devastated in 2015 by the Valley Fire. Valley Fire came through and devastated it. Lake County's been devastated over the past 10 years with over 18 fires that have burned 75% of our landmass in Lake County. During those disasters, the tribe has stepped up to be a resource center, shelter individuals, bring people to a safe environment, We have backup generation. That's why it's so important that we are able to work on microgrids and other things as we move forward. And we need the support of all the agencies as we're doing that. And yes, we are a small tribe, but that doesn't matter. We're very powerful in the area as far as economic development growth, and I think we have a great opportunity to work with this government to continue that. I not only speak from the point of a tribal leader, but I'm also, I think, the only leader in the country that also was elected to the Board of Supervisors in my county. I was a first Native American. I just served 2 terms. I did both at the same time. I was the chairman of my tribe during the pandemic that hit, and also the chairman of the Board of Lake County for the Board of Supervisors. Boy, what a challenge. Saving lives and working through projects in rural communities that are very poor. Lake County is probably 58. Well, I think we're 57 now, poorest counties in California, and we've got a lot of work to do. There's 7 tribal nations in that county that work very diligently to create jobs, opportunity, and these are things that we need to continue to grow on. But for the United States government, for its trust responsibilities signed by the treaties across this country, it's very important that we aren't caught up in the other conversations happening, and this funding is made mandatory going forward for us to continue to grow. It is a challenge. I understand. I've worked on the political side. I've been elected. I've gone through that and sat through County Board of Supervisors meeting at the local level. I understand what you're dealing with. I understand and see what's coming down the pipe here for the next 4 years with this administration. Indian country is a partner. We're here to have the fights that need to be taken, but we also need to be put in our own political environment in a government-to-government relationship as we help to continue to grow our nations. And that is really what we want to do. Continue to grow our nation, to make this nation grow, and to continue with that collaboration we've had since, the inception of the United States. 250-year celebration this year. Let's go forward, not backwards. And that's what we're prepared to do. And I know it's not easy, but as a leader of a small tribe in Northern California, we understand the complexities of grant and government operations, and we're here to help, but you need to be here and partner with us. I showed up, most of the small tribes, I was hoping there'd be a few more, because it is a one-fits-all across the country when you talk about the 500 nations across the country, but we're so totally different. It was the gold rush that affected us in Northern California when our lands were taken, so in the 1850 areas, and that's what was really devastated our tribes. Like I said, in Lake County, there's 7 different tribal nations. We all work together wholeheartedly to help keep our people moving forward. We are surrounded by we have the oldest natural lake, Clear Lake, in the area, and you always hear about salmon, but hitch. Hitch is an endangered species in our area. It only exists in Clear Lake, and we're having that fight to make sure that we can keep that tradition as alive. When I was a young man, we used to go out and collect the hitch. We'd dry them throughout the year, and that's what we used to sustain ourselves throughout the year. We can't do that anymore because the hitch are an endangered species or almost going away, and we're continuing that fight at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. So I know, you have my written testimony. I want to have it in the record.
It will be.
I also want to offer any questions from you. If you have any questions for me, I greatly appreciate the time. And as I said, I've been a long-time leader at our tribe. Elected every 2 years for the first 12 years, and then we went to 3 years. So not easy to do. And then also to be elected for the first Native American in Lake County's history, not easy to do. So community is something that I like to really try and build. Collaboration. This is a great country. We live in a great country. We are part of that. We are part of the history of this country. We're written into the Constitution. We were governments before these governments were formed, and we'll continue to hopefully be here to learn from how to deal with disagreement internally and to continue to grow. So Middletown Rancheria and the Pomo people of Northern California, Ken, great to have you here. I got to get you over to Res for a conversation. I'll say it right
That's
now.
a discussion for another time.
Another time. Thank you very
Anyway,
much, Chairman
thank you.
Simpson and Pingree. I appreciate the time today that you've given me to speak on behalf of my people. We are Kotza'atao is our language, the Lake Miwok, and we're from Oleomi, Coyote Place in Northern California.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. It's interesting. Tribes are really getting into energy production, aren't they? All across the country.
A lot of them are. There's 574 federally recognized tribes. There's, I think, less than a dozen that have formal tribal utility authorities,
Yeah.
and less than half of them actually own their own assets, right? Their own energy assets.
Yeah.
So it's still very new. There's a lot of sophistication in Indian country in gaming, not a whole lot in energy, right? So our charter as a tribally owned company is to try to be a firewall between tribes and non-tribal entities in this space, whatever that means for the tribes
Yeah.
we're developing with. But
Well, the Nez Perce tribe I know are into,
yes, sir.
they got a solar energy project up there that's going to be huge.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Many
huge.
different opportunities. We're in the creation of our utility authority, but one unique opportunity we have in our area, we have geothermal. Geothermal in our backyard that we're exploring. We have Calpine, which is one of the largest geothermal operations basically in our backyard. But from a tribal standpoint, utility authorities are the next generation for our tribal people.
We
Water,
actually have-
sewer, power, everything that needs to come along with that.
We actually have a lot of geothermal in Idaho because we're right next to Yellowstone.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of geothermal in Idaho. In fact, Idaho's capital is the only capital that is actually heated by geothermal heat and stuff like that. And
It is
a lot of downtown Boise is. And
Yeah,
stuff.
I like to say that all tribes are resource rich when it comes to energy. It's just a matter of identifying that resource, right? So some
exactly.
tribes are sitting on geothermal potential, solar, wind, natural gas is a huge component of all the projects that we do. But yeah, there's no reason why these tribes shouldn't be able to power themselves. But big part of what we do is tribal member workforce development as well, right? Where I've stood on reservations where the unemployment rate is over 50%. This isn't a lack of will, this is a lack of opportunity, right? So those utility jobs already exist on reservations, and what we're offering is to train tribal members and bring them up to the standard that they need to be, and give those jobs to tribal members in service of their own communities. In addition to eliminating their outages and saving them some money, and
Side
maybe
benefit.
offering them some economic development opportunities as well.
Ms. Pingree?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you both for your testimony, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us. You're right. We're going to go through some changes here in policy, and some of the opportunities that were there in the past may or may not stay, and certainly these investment tax credits, whether or not they get reauthorized in the big tax bill will be important to learn more about. So I fully agree that it's, with all the federally recognized tribes, it would be great if more of them had control of their own energy, or were able to see that as an economic development potential. And I like the way you were talking about, the tribes have learned a lot about casinos and, that form of economic development, but it would be really beneficial if this could continue to expand. So I just hope you'll stay in touch with us if those programs are endangered or lost, or, what we might want to work on protecting going into the future in this sort of transition time. And fascinating to hear about your tribe. You're right, we don't hear a lot from the very small ones, but it shows how you can, be successful and make that work. So, but obviously the funding is critical to that.
Funding is critical, especially land into trust, land back. Getting the land back for our individual tribal nations is the most important thing.
Yeah.
We had 80 acres, and it was given in 1906 when we were established for the Gwinnett Landis Indians. The reservation were moved off. So land into trust, just as powerful. You can't develop energy projects if you don't have land to put it on.
Right.
So really important through the BIA that is funded so we can continue that work.
That's helpful.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you talked about members of the E&W committee. Over the last 18 years, I guess. Yeah, over the last 18 years, I've either been chairman or ranking member of this committee or the Energy and Water Committee. So I sit on both. Those are my two main committees. So
Sure, well, I need
anyway,
your card then.
That's an important program that they've started with the Department of Energy and stuff.
Yes, sir.
I thank you both for your testimony, and thanks for telling us what's going on, and let's keep in touch on how we progress on this.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Final panel for this afternoon is Josh Cook, Lester, and James. Thank you. Josh, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Pingree. I'd also like to express our gratitude. We have, over the last few years, had the opportunity to build some relationships. And Congressman, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to Idaho. You met with representatives of Moortown Rancheria in Boise. Congressman Amadei came out the other day. We had a mastication process going on. We were taking trees out around Reno so Reno wouldn't burn down, and Congressman Amadei came out and tried to fire up the equipment, and that was a joy. Everyone survived. All our arms and legs are intact, and nothing burnt down because we got the trees out of the way. We're also grateful when Congressman Zinke wasn't the Secretary of Interior, he and Assistant Secretary Natalie Davis came to Moortown and met with our leaders during one of the catastrophic wildfires that we suffered through in California. We're also grateful to Congressman LaMalfa, who's our representative, and Congressman Jared Huffman from Northern California. They've helped us. I'm Josh Cook. I'm representing Chairman Benjamin Clark and the Moortown Rancheria Tribal Council. Mostly what we want to talk about today is forestry and wildfire catastrophes that keep happening in California. Moortown has made major investments. For generations, Moortown tribal members worked in the forests, and when their lands were restored and they're able to get their businesses up and running, they went back into the forest. We're doing over $17 million in forest restoration, fuels reduction, disaster cleanup, replanting, all of the aspects of forestry. We work now in the Lassen Volcanic National Park, the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest, Plumas National Forest, Lassen National Forest, Mendocino. We've worked in the El Dorado and Tahoe. We enter these relationships as equals on a government-to-government basis. We make it easier for the Forest Service and the BLM and the Park Service to actually get in and treat these forests. And we do it through interagency agreements and existing laws that were passed by Congress, implemented by the Secretaries of Interior and Agriculture, particularly in Executive Order 3403. But these laws, the Indian Self-Governance Act, the Indian Self-Determination Act, the Economy Act, Service First, and the Tribal Forest Protection Act are laws that are on the books now. And by utilizing these, not walking in the door as a vendor, but walking in the door as an equal government partner, we say to the Forest Service, what are your priorities? How can we treat these areas so that we don't continue to have these catastrophic wildfires? I think the chairman from Lake County is the only county I know of that has had more presidentially declared disasters from wildfire than Butte County, where the Moortown tribe is located. We're not here to particularly ask for more money and more staff. We want the agencies to utilize the authorities that Congress has already put on the books. There are opportunities for us to utilize their equipment. We should be able to borrow a low bed trailer and a bulldozer. We should be able to take those other tools under the laws that exist now and be able to utilize those in advancing the work of the Interior and the Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. Many times we ask for that equipment and we're just ignored. We need help inside the Bureau of Indian Affairs processing the payments that come from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Interior and Bureau of Indian Affairs into our Forest Trust account. Sometimes it causes a major cash flow problem. We've had 50, 60 tribal members out working and can't make payroll because the transfer of funds inside of the payment system of the federal government, we front the money as a tribe to pay those bills of people who've been out working in the forests. Those are a couple of the issues that are of vital importance to us as we move forward. Another thing, Mr. Chairman, that we're working on is trees and lumber are assets, and the Forest Service has a right to transfer them to us. We believe that we can take trees and fund these forest activities inside the federal government between the tribe and the agencies and come up with the revenue that we need to do this vital work in the forest so they don't just burn down. And at that, my time is up, and I'm honored to be with Chair Nieto and Governor Naranjo and would not want to take any of their time. Thank you.
Let's hear your next.
I'll turn this thing on. It's not. I'm pushing it too hard.
Are you, I think, is it on?
No, it's still red. Yeah, red's on. Oh, red's on?
Mine's green, yours is red.
Oh, thought it meant stop already. Well, greetings, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Shinita. I'm honored to appear before you today on behalf of the Two River Indian Tribe, where I serve as the chairman.
I come before you today to share Tule River's greetings and strong support for Indian water rights settlements, which are multi-party negotiation agreements that arise through federal rights. Settlements are not a handout and are not derived from any government program. Rather, they are agreements that resolve long-standing contractual legal claims. The Tule River Tribe Reserve Water Rights Settlement Act enjoys broad support from the community members representing agricultural and municipal interests called the South Fork Tule River Coalition. They know this bill will help secure water availability now and into the future, and will put to rest potential legal issues that could arise if it is not passed into law. Our Settlement Act is also needed for the survival of my people. It will provide access water for our reservation and for our survival of our tribal nation. By passing our Settlement Act will be a true success for all communities involved, not just Tule River. It will ensure water security in an area that has faced catastrophic wildfire and as well as record-breaking drought and flooding. I'd like to thank Senator Padilla, Representative Fong, and Representative Lamalfa, as well as their representative staff, our respected staff, and their assistance and support. I'd also like to thank Chairman Westerman, Chairman Bentz, and Staff Director Anika Miller for the effective leadership and hard work. The Tule River Indian Reservation covers about 85 square miles in rugged foothill terrain in Sierra Nevada mountains in central California. The elevation range from 900 to 7,500 feet. The South Fork of the Tule River runs through the middle of the reservation and flows into the main Tule River about 10 miles west of us. There are no significant uses of water upstream over the reservation. There's a significant lack of water supply for the reservation. We have worked for decades to address our water rights to make our reservation a permanent homeland. As we were initially promised, the current water supply is unpredictable and unsafe. We are forced to drink brown water at times or go without. The water system relies on a series of wells, springs, and water drawn directly from the South Fork, which is treated to meet only potable water standards. Our water delivery infrastructure is held together with duct tape and wire. Actually, water demand far from exceeds water availability. The South Fork provides my tribe with about 80% of its water. But our tribe is unable to use most of the water of the river flow. To make use of this water in a meaningful way, it must be stored because the river runs low and even goes dry several months of the year. 53 years of concentrated work has led to this moment. We seek to codify the agreement and we have with our neighbors, the South Fork Tule River Independent Ditch Company and the Tule River Association. We represent all senior water right holders involved. Their members are major players in the agricultural economy and livelihoods of critical to both the local community and as well as America's food supply more broadly. We have satisfied each of the requirements in the 1990 policy guidance. If we were to file a lawsuit, it would tie up existing water uses for decades. Settlement outside of court is everyone's best interest, including the tribes, our downstream neighbors in the Central Valley, and taxpayers at large. Any litigation will be drawn out, expensive, and risky. Taxpayers have seen negative impacts from not finalizing the settlement. In recent years, they have had to pay for increased wildfire suppression efforts, bottled water deliveries, and repair and washed out roads. We seek a win-win solutions. Our Settlement Act will allow the Tule River Tribe to finally have a functioning homeland with clean water and that is safe to drink. It will allow the U.S. to meet its legal obligations. It will impound water at high elevation, which is exactly the kind of drought solution called for by the Central Valley agricultural industry. It also will provide strategic dipping pools in event of a wildfire. In conclusion, the Tule River Tribe is in a water crisis. Broken promises and previous failures of the U.S. led to where we are today. The time has come to address the emergency conditions on our reservation and for our federal partners to join in and provide the resources necessary to ensure sustainable future for the Tule River Tribe. Doing so will also benefit surrounding communities, secure water availability for all interests, and ensure clarity of title. We respectfully request the subcommittee continue to make funding for Indian water settlements like the Tule River Water Settlement Act a priority. I thank Chairman Simpson, members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to fully express Tule River's views on this subject. Please refer to my written testimony, which includes details regarding the dam construction project, how we have met federal government requirements for this settlement, and further explanation of our water shortage crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. James?
Thank you, Keith. James Durant Hope from Santa Clara, Pueblo. No advice in the Kootenai for that. He's trying to go on from him. You know, he worked a job in honor of him. Thank you, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree. I lay my respect down from our Pueblo, from our culture, our religion to you and the staff. The Governor of Santa Clara, Pueblo, in northern New Mexico. I have provided written testimony for you all. I'm a retired lawman for the state of New Mexico. I served 20-some odd plus years serving our state of New Mexico and our country. Thank you for this time. First, I want to express my concern regarding the recent policy action that will affect the well-being of tribal communities, the whole state, the whole United States. The United States fulfills its trust and treaty obligations to both direct delivery of programs to the contracting of federal trust obligations to tribal nations to perform the service themselves. Policy decisions that have tribal implications such as delivery of trust and treaty responsibilities, which you've been hearing all day. Consultation of properly satisfy the federal government legal obligations, which is rooted in the treaties and trust obligations of the U.S. Constitution and the longstanding federal statutes. With that, I have a few priorities. You know, being a retired lawman, our tribal law enforcement officers and our teachers are so crucial, so critical to the drug epidemic and the crime. We're very blessed to implement VAWA in the state of New Mexico. We're one of the first tribes in New Mexico that established VAWA. We turned our little old laundromat into a beautiful courthouse, and I invite you all one day to come and visit. I advocated and testified in Alaska. I ran dogs for cadaver dogs for many, many years. Unfortunately, you know, it brings a lot of closure to the families. You know, there's not many times that we cover human life. You know, it's always just a closure. And but most of our law enforcement officers are retired. My colleagues, they're retired lawmen that come and work for us. And then when we do hire a young cadet, he sticks around for a couple years, and then he bounces to Los Alamos, to Santa Fe County, to Albuquerque, where the pay is higher. And we're like a training facility, you know, and then we have to start all over, and they're our members. And it hurts us because we can't supply that, we can't match that salary, nor can we match those benefits. And then we go into our teachers. We've took over our own community school. And, excuse me. So we're blessed to have our own teachers from Santa Clara Pueblo. So we've implemented our language in math, science, history. We teach in English, and we teach in Tewa. What a beautiful thing to have. Growing up, we didn't have that. We didn't have that ability to learn our language in school. We had to learn it outside of school grounds. Now we implement all of those things so that we learn, and they're gifted in both worlds. We grow up in two worlds, our Tewa way and the white man's way, if I were to say it, right? And it's the success of our children. I'm blessed to have a retired son who's a Navy medic. I have a son who's an FBI agent. And I have another son who's a teacher. I have another son that's a mechanic. And I have another son who works for Delta. And they all learn their language, you know, and they all have the respect for both cultures. And so that's very challenging for them, but they're successful. We have kids that are doctors, pharmacists, but we can't retain them in our village because we just don't have that capability and capacity to match the salaries in the national laboratory that's next door to us. And so we urge the United States to help us with these programs so that we can match these salaries and match these funds so that we can retain our own people. We're not asking for handouts, we're just asking to help us and to continue our partnership so that we can continue to grow. In 2009, the United States Congress passed legislation authoring the planning and implementation to improve our irrigation infrastructure. We're all farmers, cattlemen. We have seeds from hundreds of years old that we continue to grow, that we continue to use for our ways of life. And if you don't know, we have suffered 4 major forest fires in New Mexico. 100% fish kill, 80% of our watershed destroyed. Just last year, we suffered another flood. Wipes out our roads, wipes out our new ditches, wipes out our head gates. And it's so costly because we have to go and redig, and we have to stop the Rio Grande and start all over again. It's like that every year we're facing these flooding events. And so we hope that those infrastructure projects continue to help us so that we can continue our ways of life. Then we go into IHS. We have a small clinic, 40 years old plus. Thousands of members from different small tribes come to our facility. Lack of doctors, lack of nurses, lack of health care. Same reason. We have our own nurses, doctors, but they go to Presbyterian, St. Vincent's, and we lose those quickly because we just cannot compete. But we're trying so hard to provide a better benefits to them, and it's closer to home. They're down the road for these to work, but our buildings are outdated. I think I was a sophomore when that clinic was built, and it's the same clinic. And it's unfortunate, but we try our best in Santa Clara to make those needs for our people. We have maybe 3,400 members currently. We've changed our enrollment process during the COVID because we didn't have a playbook, so we can get the drug dealers out of our village. We can get those people out of there. You know, we've employed almost 600 people. I look over 200 and some on the left hand of the administrative side, and on our corporation over 300, Indian and non-Indian. Provide those kids scholarships, provide those families a good benefit. And those are some of the things that we're trying to do to make our environment better. You know, we're having water rights cases that we're fighting for. You know, we've owned that, and our ancestors protected those good water sources. It's kind of a memorial. And we're still fighting for our rights, and we're good neighbors, and we want to continue to be good neighbors and move forward together, partnership. I was very blessed with my attorney and lobbyist to meet every one of those individuals on the board behind you yesterday and even today, and to share our thoughts, and to share our partnership, and to share how we can work collaboratively together to make things right for all of us, not just us, but for everybody that comes to our valley, comes to our village. So thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate your help that you can do.
Thank you all for your testimony. And so, I just want to, you said you were 20-some odd years in law enforcement, tribal law enforcement?
No, I was a sheriff, I was a city police, I worked in corrections, I went to the city police in Santa Fe County, and I ran K-9s on the Mexican border. I worked with Customs, I worked with FBI, I worked with all the local police. I worked with the Four Corners. I had bloodhounds, I had German Shepherds. I still have one more German Shepherd. I was contracted to work at the state legislature for bombs, and my dog broke his arm last year, so I lost my certification. He got caught in one of our new cattle guards, and but we're still actively searching for people. I get calls all the time for the missing men and women, indigenous people that are missing. I do volunteer search. I have a volunteer team. We just ask people to feed us, and that's it. And
you raised a question that is we've had discussions about it, is how do we keep officers when there is an easy challenge, and it's not just police officers, firemen, other things. How do we keep them there? I don't mean this. How how do we make it attractive for them to stay? And do you think that if somehow salaries and benefits were competitive with Albuquerque or whatever, that they would leave?
They would stay because their
Do you think they'd stay? That would
families
keep
and
them.
homes, yeah, they're all native. I'm a native, and I never worked for the tribe in law enforcement because the salary was better in Santa Fe County, right? And my kids went to different private, to the Indian school, to the boarding school, and some went to the public school, right? It was their choice, but, and then they all have a college education but me, right? Because of the salary. And then after I retired, the tribe brought me over. I served as lieutenant governor for many, many years, and now I have the opportunity to be the governor and continue to lead our people in the right direction.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Pingree?
Thank you all for your testimony and all the different issues that you brought up. And I hope we can be helpful in some way in the concerns that you brought up around working with the Forest Service and other agencies. I think there's been a lot of interest in how we can have these cooperative agreements, and it sounds like there's some places that the agencies aren't doing their side, their part, and particularly with the Forest Service, that also the funding comes under this committee, and maybe we can just find some ways to be helpful to make sure the payments go through or the machinery borrowing, because there's obviously a great need for doing that work in the forest and trying to prevent future fires. So
We'd appreciate any help. It's kind of a culture change, and right now the Forest Service is experiencing an upheaval. And what we're doing is we're going to them and saying, hey, we have the mechanisms in law already to take these assets and turn them back into revenue that will help the forests be able to accomplish the things they've already done the NEPA for. They've already done the planning. It's just a matter of, in the past, tribes had these authorities but didn't have the capacity to show up and say, we'll do that. Well, Moortown has made the investments in a lot of the machinery and a lot of the people, and now they can show up as a partner at the table. We think more tribe, and we hire, everywhere we go, we hire other tribes first. When we go over to Nevada and when we go into other tribal Aboriginal areas in California, we hire those other tribes to try to build capacity. But the laws that Congress has made for tribes to engage in these government-to-government activities really can solve a lot of the problems that the Forest Service is trying to work around right now, ma'am.
that's great. So hopefully we can help on that.
We have cooperative agreements with BLM, the national parks, and the U.S. Forest Service that surround our reservation, and they work because we have the capacity to manage those forests because the Forest Service and BLM and the national parks own. So these cooperative agreements help us.
Did you do some logging too?
Your guys,
Yeah.
which is great.
Well, thank you. And your water crisis sounds very severe, so I hope we can help move that forward. That's just a terrible position for your tribe to be in, and it sounds like you need some assistance.
Yeah, that's the sad part is that when we wasn't considered humans or even extinct animals in 1922, our babysitter sold our rights away to the downstream users, and so now we had to get those downstream users to give back to us and agree with us just to be at this table today. You know what I mean, and so like in 1971. Then Alec Garfield, the chairman of a reservation, started this battle, and even him starting that battle, he gets accused of giving our water rights away, but he wasn't even thought in his ancestral minds in 1922. I mean, so it's a big battle, and he's not getting any younger. So I would like to see, like you, sir, Mr. Simpson, you talk about the money that it's already there. If we would have got it back in 1971, the cost wouldn't be so high for tribes.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone would have heard us then, the cost would have been lower. But now we're sitting there at the table again, and who takes over for me? I took over for Alec. Who takes over for me? What person takes over for me next from the tribe or from other tribes? That have to come here and sit with somebody other than yourself. If we can't get it done now, who sits here and where does it go from there? Is it going to take centuries again just for us to get to this table again? And how much is it going to cost us to get out here? The money I spent to get here from my tribe, I could have used it on our youth or our elders, without having to worry about, coming out here and hearing, yes, we can do this, or at least say something to us where we can at least go home and say, we got this, we got that. And it's a long ways out here. I had to sit coach's time, and I'm a big dude, as big as my bro back there. But it's pretty sad that we're still here. We hear about these third world countries getting millions and billions of dollars. We're only asking for, with the tribes that are asking, it's only $1 billion right now. I mean, it sounds like a big number, but it's not a big number when you're giving to a lot more tribes than just one. I mean, you're only giving to one little third world country, and you say, oh, how can you compare yourself to a third world country? Well, we can't, because they get money and we don't.
Anyway, I appreciate, was that all?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you all for your testimony. It is actually, I know it seems sometimes kind of crazy that, as you said, you come out, you spend the money, you come out here, and it's a long flight. I fly to Idaho all the time, so I know how long it is. And then we give you 5 minutes to talk to us and answer a few questions and that kind of stuff. But it really does help us in looking at when we put our bill together. We do listen to your testimony, and we do read the testimony that you give to us and stuff. So it is, I've always felt like, when you walk away from all this, do you go, that was worthless? I can tell you it's not.
No, that's why I thank you in my testimony first thing.
But it is very important to us. It's probably more important to us than it is to you, because we're going to end up writing this bill, and we want to take into consideration the issues that you bring up. So thank you all for your testimony. I appreciate it very much.
You guys have a good day.
You bet.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for taking the time to join us. The committee stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9:30.